In this recording, we'll be looking at the SEEN curriculum content and how it was developed. So if we start first of all by thinking about how we came to the curriculum content and how we decided what should be taught. It was developed in collaboration with Oxford University and two advisory groups, an academic group and an education group. And in particular, the academic group fed into what the content should be that we teach young people. And in that group, we had experts from the fields of child and adolescent psychiatry, child development, psychology, and also early years. And so they came up with the curriculum content points that we identified. And there are 12 of those, 12 statements, and they cover 3 areas. And as you can see here, they cover a little bit about the neuroscience of brain development, the influence of experiences provided by caregivers, and then a little bit about the evidence to support that and the impacts on long-term health. However, we also look at the non-deterministic nature of early development. So what I'm going to do is go through these 3 areas, and in fact, they overlapped quite closely with the 3 lesson contents as well. So let's start with the neuroscience of brain development. As you can see, this is broken down into 6 different statements, and teachers can come and look at these statements rather than use the lesson plans if they prefer, or if they want to divert and prepare their own activities, and then they can refer to the core content that the experts felt ought to be taught on this area. So we start by thinking about what it is that the brain's made up of in terms of neurons. Then we look at this genetics versus environment, and both have a role to play in development. And that italics there is recommended for more able students, higher students, older students, or extending students. So the epigenetics, meaning that even genes aren't fixed. Third point there, this idea that new experiences lead to new neural circuits being formed, and that those are strengthened or weakened by the experiences that an individual has. So essentially, 3 and 4 there are defining the word neuroplasticity, which is the ability of the brain to change throughout a person's life. And then finally, just identifying the 2 periods of sensitivity or particular periods of plasticity, and that's the early years, 0 to 5, but also adolescence, 11 to 25. So that covers the neuroscience that is included within the SEEN curriculum content. Let's have a think about that role of the early sensitive periods, so 0 to 5, by looking at the next curriculum points. So these cover experiences provided by the caregiver. So if we think about that genes versus environment, this is very much the environment side of it. And obviously the environment of a young child is determined by whoever's caring for that child. So we've got 3 areas here. We do talk about development in the uterus, and this is where schools may want to link it in with content that's often covered in Year 7 around reproduction. So looking at the fact that experiences during development in the womb or the uterus, and as well as throughout early years. So 9, we're looking there at caregivers and the role that caregivers can have in determining brain development during this period. And there are 3 areas that are in the core content, A, B, C, and then D is, again, an extension activity to cover executive function skills. So looking at the first 3, we've got this responsive reciprocal caregiver interactions. We call them serve and return in the lessons. And then we've got baby talk. And again, if you're trying to extend young people, you can use parentese or child-directed speech. And then finally, playful learning. So those are the core content. And again, if you want to extend pupils, you can go further and use D. So those are experiences by the caregiver. Let's look at the final section that I've broken the content down into, and that's evidence and non-deterministic nature. So this idea that the early years can be very important for determining long-term physical and mental health. So very much that public health message, in the same way that we might teach obesity or heart disease and other areas of the biology curriculum that link to health. Then we also like to recognise that what happens in the early years is not deterministic. So it's not the only factor. And we do that by looking at data in the lessons and experimentation. So very much around that how science works angle. Touching therefore on our final curriculum content point, which is about resilience. And very much this is coming from the brain resilience angle. So the fact that brain, we can develop resilience through supportive relationships and developing the skills, which can link back to that executive function skills if you did that as an extension. So that summarises the 12 curriculum points. If you're keen to find out about how the lessons map onto these curriculum points, please watch the video around the scene lessons.